help people get really healthy, mind, body, and spirit. I'm not about routines or diets. This is about mindset. This is about our core self, who we think we are, how we think about ourselves when we think about ourselves. You know, there's the Summer Olympics are coming up, and Simone Biles is this incredible gymnast, and she is incredibly flexible. She has this physical kinesthetic flexibility that is the greatest in the world. And we, the same way, have the ability to become more physically flexible. If I go and I, practice touching my toes or whatever for months and months on end, I'll be able to do it with my legs straight. Same is true about who we are. We have core self-flexibility. We could change who we are.
I have the pleasure today of being with Dr. Phil Pearlman of the Pearl Institute. I am so excited. He's the founder of the Pearl Institute, and I'm super excited for our conversation today. Welcome to the show, Dr. Pearlman.
Larry, thanks for having me, man. I really appreciate it.
Phil, listen, I love the entrepreneurial journey. I love sharing with our listeners. I always find it fascinating. So before we jump into what you're doing today with the Pearl Institute, can you give it a little bit of your background, what you did, what brought you up to the point of founding the Pearl Institute?
Well, I'm going to try to give you the short version because I could just talk and talk, but I went to grad school in the area of clinical psychology. So by training, I'm a psychologist. And then right when I was getting out of grad school, I connected with a hedge fund manager, and he pulled me in, and we were working behavioral systems. This goes back to the alts. And so I did that for a while. And then I moved into social media in the late aughts. And I got away from myself. I was always a helper person, and I studied clinical psychology for a reason. I was going to be an adolescent psychologist, and I worked in that area. And I got into finance deeper and deeper, venture capital and seed capital, and I got further and further away from that part of me and went down a very interesting road. Finance, media, startups, a lot of really great stuff in that area. Built a network in the finance community, in the advisor space, a lot of close connections there. But the further I went along, I was getting further and further from myself. And that was showing up not only in my mindset, but also in my health. I wasn't taking care of myself, and I was really, doing a lot of things I shouldn't have been doing. And then I woke up one morning and I was like, something's got to change. And I began to change. I began to do things and take better care of myself. Really got into that. And as I started going down that road, I discovered, hey, I used to be an athlete. When I was a kid, all I loved to do is go play ball and run. And I started getting closer to that part of me, rediscovering it. And I decided one day I woke up, I was a CMO at a money manager. And I just decided, hey, I'm going to do this. I'm going to take the leap. I'm going to start my own business that's focused on helping other people get healthy. I notice there's a lot of people out there who are very, very successful financially and who are not necessarily taking care of the only mind and body and spirit that they're ever issued. So I dedicated myself at that moment to doing this. And now I get to work with amazing people all the time. I get to help people. It's incredible.
Amazing. So, I have to ask you, because today, right, the term behavioral finance, especially when it relates to people and their money and, the advisory space is being talked about, virtually daily at this point. I think when you started that, it was not the case. So what was it like to be one of the first to enter that behavioral finance role or that space?
Well, there was an incredible community then, and it was focused more on judgment and decision-making. The roots of behavioral finance are in social psychology and judgment and decision-making. And I came at it from the opposite direction. I was studying psychology, and I was interested not only in clinical psychology, but also social components of clinical psychology, like how we behave and how we interact. And I discovered really Kahneman and Tversky that way. And then as I was getting interested in money and in money management, I discovered that, hey, wow, there's this whole field. This was before Kahneman won the Nobel Prize. This is before 2001. This is in the late 90s. And I discovered there's this whole field that is really an integration of psychology and economics and psychology of finance. And I will tell you this, that the parallels between wealth and health are profound. And the parallels between behavioral finance and behavioral health are profound. And I'll give you just one quick example and throw it back to you.
Sure.
We do things, if there's one great takeaway from the first 50 years of behavioral economics, it's this. Humans don't always act in their own best interest, right? We make mistakes. We make them over and over again. We go, darn it, I did it again. And then we go out and we do it again. It's very frustrating. That idea, that sense is exactly parallel to clinical psychology, right? That parallel is, you take somebody that has obsessive compulsive disorder, right? And they can't stop checking the door to make sure it's locked when they leave the house. They come back and they check 5 times. That's an actual type of OCD, is checking OCD. They know it. They know that damn, I did it again. I didn't need to do it. I'm going to be late for this thing. And it's very frustrating. It's a very similar process. It's a parallel process. And so that parallel is familiar to people in finance. That parallel is very familiar to the advisor community, because we we do these things that affect our money life. We do these things that affect our health. We do these things that affect our quality of life and well-being. So the parallels were clear to me, and I was always just fascinated by it. Like you can hear just in my voice right now talking.
Yeah, 100%. And we talk very often, even on the show, about what I call the three-legged stool, which is your physical health, your mental health, and your financial health. And I think there's parallels drawn between all three of those. And if you're lacking in any one of those areas, it has a direct and significant impact in the other areas. It's just, they're just, as you said, there are parallels between them that you can't avoid. So it's you have to address them all in some way, shape, or form to make sure that you're taking care of yourself in those at least those three ways.
Yeah, it's like the corners of a triangle. Like if you change one angle in a triangle, the other angles change, and so they're just intricately interwoven.
Sure.
How we feel, how we treat our body, and how our body's behaving, how we're thinking, and how we're doing things in the world, such as working and saving and investing.
Yeah. So, I mean, listen, but I think, although behavioral finance isn't new, I think to some of our listeners, it may be something that's new. Can you, share with the listeners why you feel behavioral finance is so important? I mean, I think you alluded to it a little bit, but maybe you could just point blank it for our listeners.
There's an overstatement sometimes. People say, hey, if you're self-aware, that's all you need, right? And it's really not. You need more. So I don't want to overstate it, because people treat, especially when the market's getting killed, you always see these articles in Wall Street Journal, 7 behavioral biases and the stupid things we do with money. You never see those articles when the market's going up, by the way. You see them after the damage is done. You should be reading that stuff when the market's crushing, even though it's not necessarily sufficient. It is so critical. So if we have some insight into how we're behaving and why, we can at least prepare ourselves to do the things that we need to do. And if we need to turn some knobs and make the changes that we need to. If we don't even know what's going on, how do we make where do we make changes from? So really, it is an environment for us to think about. It's a mental model for us to be able to leap from.
Yeah, well, I think that's good news, right? Because we find a lot of people who have a tendency to repeat the same mistakes they have, think that to some degree they can't get out of it. But what you're saying is there are ways that you can start working on yourself to work yourself out of these bad habits or tendencies, which is vitally important. Vitally important.
I love hearing you say that and just saying it right out of the blue, because this is a fundamental tenet of Pearl Institute. And that is that we have this capacity to make changes in our lives. We are at the wheel and we are steering, and we are not always victims, and we are not always at the whim of the universe. We can make changes to ourselves, even as we get older. I mean, I didn't quit drinking until I was 51 years old, and really didn't start to really get healthy till I was past 50, like in a way that was really really moving in the right direction. I was battling myself, but really, and so it's never too late, and we can always do it. And we're incredibly adaptive animals. There's humans who live, we were just in Costa Rica. It's near the equator. There's humans that live at the equator, and there's humans that live above that arc of the Arctic Circle. Unbelievably adaptive animals at almost any age.
Yeah, I agree. There was a quote that was in your newsletter. I thought it was a thoughtful line, which was, there is only one true benchmark, and it's staring us in the mirror. And I thought that was so thoughtful, and it resonated with me. Can you share what you mean by this? Because I think this kind of dovetails into what we were just talking about.
This dovetails perfectly. And that is, people spend a lot of effort and time comparing themselves to others. There was a quote from J.P. Morgan: "Nothing so undermines your financial judgment as the sight of your neighbor getting rich." Okay. And we have this tendency to nod our heads when there's a famous quote. Somebody says something, some famous guy says something 100 years ago, whether it's J.P. Morgan or W.H. Auden or Ben Franklin, and we just kind of go like this, like we agree with it. But listen, J.P. Morgan, he was one of the richest men in the world, and he was a total narcissist and impossible to work with. I'm not necessarily training my life off of him, right? And so I say no, J.P. Morgan. I go against you on this. I could take pleasure in seeing my neighbor get rich. I don't have to be, just because you saw somebody else doing well. So this idea that we can take joy in our own lives and the lives of others and enjoy our lives, that comes from improvement and thriving. All we have to do to thrive is improve by this much over any period of time. If we're moving in the right direction, it's like with in corporate. If a company is just growing revenue, that's a strong tailwind. If we're just improving by a little bit, and so no matter what we do, there's always going to be somebody better than us, right? There's always going to be, unless we're Michael Jordan or John Coltrane or Usain Bolt, always going to be somebody better at what we do. And so the only thing that really matters is comparing ourselves to ourselves yesterday. So we're just getting a little bit better than we were the day before, and that is our benchmark. Then we can have joy. We can take joy in the success of others, right? In Buddhism, they call that mudita, vicarious joy, right? And you can do that. It's the opposite of Schadenfreude, right? We can do that. We can experience that. We can experience all kinds of joy. And I know that's a big thing with you, and I know we're going to talk about that. I'm getting ahead of myself. But this idea, we can look in the mirror. There's a mirror right there. I can look in the mirror, and I can say, okay, how am I doing? How am I doing? Yesterday. That's the only true benchmark.
Yeah, I talk a lot about the gap and the gain, and we always talk about looking ahead at what we're trying to achieve, and we're always concentrating on what we have in front of us and how far we have to go, instead of taking from time to time those few minutes to look backwards and seeing how far we've come and taking pride and joy in that. I think that's, very important. And, over the last 4 years, I've started on this journey and this power of joy. And creating this message and sharing this message of joy. And the power of it has been unbelievable. And the number of people and that have reached out to me about it and now have adopted it because they know I've adopted it is amazing. And I know you're in the same boat. So why is sharing gratitude and joy, why does it tend to be so magical?
Well, we learn by our own experiences, right? Um, Great poet once said, I wake to sleep and take my waking slow. I learn by going where I have to go. Theodore Roque. And I learned that the power of joy from experiencing joy, just from N of one, just being my own scientist, right? The scientist of my own experience. When I have had ego and have been jealous and have been sort of more in the JP Morgan mode, it's contributed to my own misery. And so, quotes aside and poetry aside, you just try something and see that you gain joy from it, and if it comes from a religion or if it comes from a philosophy, if it comes from Buddhism like mudita, great, great guidance, but we learn from our own experience. So what I saw was when I became a cheerleader for others, when I became my own cheerleader, when I just took time to hang out with my kids and do things that are little things, doesn't have to be the big fancy car, doesn't have to be whatever, just these little things that were joy, that brought me joy. I could bottle that. I could say, hey, you know what? I'm just going to do that again. It's like positive reinforcement, right? You get the food pellet, you repeat, you press the button again, like you're a pigeon, right? You press the button again. That's simple. I'm that stupid. That's simple. I did something. It felt great. It fulfilled me and it nourished me. Did it again.
Yeah. I think that's great points and very important for us to kind of make note of that. What things we've done that have created that joyful event in our life, and then not recreate it, but do it again. Figure out another way to get that same result, that same feeling. So, you've been heard saying that the real superpowers are incredibly boring things. The real superpowers are incredibly boring things. What do you mean by that?
Well, here's the thing. We live in a very simple universe, right? If I drop this marker, it's going to fall to the ground. There is gravity. I don't necessarily understand all the physics behind it. And like the larger the mass, the greater the gravity. I don't need to understand that. I understand it's a law of the universe. And the laws of the universe are just very, very simple. And in our society today, we wrap them in these veils of complexity. Everything's so complicated. Everything's so difficult. Everything's so, and it's my view that these veils of complexity are really just sort of ways that we keep ourselves from feeling things that might be uncomfortable or having experiences that we don't want to have. And so we make this world complicated. And this is an epidemic in our world, when in reality, when we peer under that veil or we look behind the curtain in Wizard of Oz terms, the world is actually just incredibly simple. And there's really only 4 or 5 things. For different people, they may be slightly different. For me, they go like this: get a good night's sleep, eat real food, not too late in the day, not at 10 o'clock at night, but eat just real foods, whether it's, beef or fruits or vegetables or fish. Rest my body and love your people. Be with your people. If that's your family, if it's your close friends, whoever it is, get with the community and allow yourself to be loved and love. Those 4 things guide the universe for me. So all the other things, knowing the difference between an IRA and a Roth IRA, maybe it'll save me some money, but it's a tiny minor thing relative to those 4 things. As long as I keep on track there, everything else takes care of itself. And those are just simple, boring things that everybody kind of knows and is like, yeah, I know. And even the attitude we have towards it in this culture is like a negative attitude where really those are just the basics.
Right. Yeah, I think everybody has to find what their four things are, find their why, and then live every day like they're living towards that why. So I think that's great advice. So, listen, can you share? I mean, you gave us a lot of background. You're really in alignment with what we're all about: joy and gratitude, and making sure we're doing what those important things, the things that really matter, not that matter to everybody else, but truly matter to us. Can you share, what is the Pearl Institute, and what do you do on a day-to-day basis, and who do you do it for?
Well, my network was really around the finance community, the advisor community, venture, entrepreneurship. And so I just sort of gravitated towards that population, but it's not the only group of people that I work with. What I do is I help people get really healthy, mind, body, and spirit. I'm not about routines or diets. This is about mindset. This is about our core self, who we think we are, how we think about ourselves when we think about ourselves. There's the Summer Olympics are coming up, and Simone Biles is this incredible gymnast, and she is incredibly flexible. She has this physical kinesthetic flexibility that is the greatest in the world. And we, the same way, have the ability to become more physically flexible. If I go and I, practice touching my toes or whatever for months and months on end, I'll be able to do it with my legs straight. Same is true about who we are. We have core self flexibility. We could change who we are. And so I try to work at that level with people. So I don't want you, let's say you come to me and you're not moving your body, or you're overweight, or you're not functioning well in some way, or you're having trouble making a decision. I go to, well, who's the person you want to be? And let's go there, so that when we're done, this is a finite program. When we're done, you are that person. And it's not like, oh, I have to be disciplined, I have to have willpower. It's just, hey, this is who I am now. I'm a healthy person. I'm a walker. I have one guy who still texts me all the time. We worked together a year ago with his little map of his walking route. And he's like, hey, Phil, I'm a walker. Like, that is part of his self-schema now. It's beautiful to see it. I love it. So I do that work. I work with a lot of people who are really strong in finance, especially advisors. And the thing with the advisors is that we work a lot on future self. And as you know, future self and future planning is a huge part of being an advisor, right? Hey, take a look down the road. Where do you want to be in 5 years? Where do you want to be in 20 years? And that future self, that time perspective, that ability, that cognitive capacity to imagine your future self is a very similar, it's very, like we were talking about before, behavioral finance, health, and wealth. It's a strong parallel. It's really one and the same. It's not even parallel. Getting more than that. It's just one and the same. So at Pearl Institute, now I'm starting to have some corporate clients as well, where I'm working with teams. That is pretty early on, but it's really exciting for me, because working with teams and working with clients who are trying to develop more life coaching programs, like, hey, this is not just about money management and financial planning. This is about life planning. So I'm starting to do some of that work too. I have one client in that area, and I have another that I'm probably going to be onboarding fairly soon. Really, really cool to me, because I would love to be able to scale my impact. Right. You know what I mean? I would love to be able to help a larger group of people and make concentric larger circles over time. That's kind of where I'm heading at this point. That's kind of like top of mind right now.
Sounds amazing. One thing I learned about you when I was, researching about you is, I guess we've both struggled at times, or maybe still, with meditating. And I find it very relaxing and comforting when I can actually sit there, and I'm at the point now where I can tell whether I really had a relaxing meditation or it was not as relaxing, and I walk away with a different feeling. What tips do you have for those who've maybe tried it and given up? Because I was almost there myself. I was like, I don't think this is for me. I don't think I can do this. And then somebody kind of said, hey, nobody could really do this 100% of the time. Your mind wandering is natural. You just got to figure out how to manage that while you're and that was like a changing point for me. What tips do you have for those that may have tried and given up, or are at that point where they're thinking about giving up?
We are successful Americans. Most people watching this, I'm sure there's people in other countries, but we are successful Americans. And so what do? We put a lot, going back to our one true benchmark, we compare ourselves with others, and we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to be incredibly successful. Oh, if I'm going to be meditating, I have to be really good at it. And I got to get the meditation thing going. I got to do whatever it is. But see, that is actually perfectly upside down, because a meditation is really just letting go. And so really what we want to do is we want to not try to be great at it. We just want to let ourselves be and let ourselves do it. I did that by discovering I was already meditating. So I would go on these long walks in the woods, sometimes with my wife, sometimes with my dog, sometimes with both of them, sometimes with the kids, sometimes just by myself. And I would allow, my mind would just wander. And I would just be, things would flow. And it was like that, like that lyric from the Beatles, words are flowing out like endless rain inside a paper cup, right? It was like letting things come and letting things go and having ideas, having them pop up and then they disappear. And I was meditating. I was walking in the woods with the leaves under my feet crunching, and I was meditating. I didn't even realize it. And so that, for me, what I would recommend is, if I was in a bad mood, I'd probably kick you if you asked me. And if I was in a good mood, I'd probably just say, don't try. Just go for a walk. Just go find the woods. Probably help you a lot.
Yeah, I think there's preconceived notions about really what meditating is, and I think the more you read up about it and look into it, I think that, like you said, there are many different applications that kind of get the same results, and it doesn't matter what other people are doing; it just matters what works for you. So, one of the things you've also mentioned, earlier was about being an athlete and enjoying playing ball when you were a kid. How do you think being an athlete when you were young, shaped who you are today? And how do you think that also, secondarily ties into, why fitness is, a key to success for you at the same time? Because you said that that's really one of those 4 top things for you as well.
So I'm reading this book. And by the way, I have clients who were D1 athletes who were incredibly, so much more athletic than I'll ever be. I was an athlete, but, pretty good. But I loved it. But I wasn't stellar. I didn't play D1 ball and, all that kind of stuff, or even D3 ball or anything. But I have clients who are athletes, and they moved further and further away from it over time. Real life happens, right? They have babies. They got to pay taxes. They got works. They got bosses. They got things they got to do. And that happens. And so we get further and further away from that self that we were when we were 11, up at, Pikesville High playing basketball with the older kids, and just, hey, I could do that all day. I could do it for 5 hours straight, no break. And so I'm reading this book that was called Buddha for Beginners or something, like Buddha for Dummies or whatever, but they couldn't call it that. And it was written by a Western guy who sort of understands this. Hey, you're a Westerner, but you're trying to understand this Eastern thought. So you're a little too competitive to understand it. And there was a quote that said, there was a passage that read, enlightenment is really just rediscovery. And when I read it, I was training for a half marathon and I was enjoying it. I was like doing it with my kid or something, and we were just having a ball. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. It was like just rediscovering who you are, peeling that onion, getting back to that 11-year-old. And so for me, playing ball and athletics and now running and doing push-ups and stuff like that and swimming during the summer is really just me just getting back to me. It's just rediscovery of that real self that was kind of buried under all of this muck of like living and not taking care of myself and having responsibilities and doing things that I didn't want to be doing. That was really, so that's profound to me. So now when I go back to that self schema, those things that I think about myself, when I think about myself, even though I'm not the fastest. I mean, I went out and ran this half marathon last year, and there was like, there was a 71-year-old guy that kicked my butt. He's like 15 years older than me, and he didn't just beat me by like a minute a mile, or more. And, it was just like, okay, that's cool. But written here is like, I'm an athlete, I'm a runner, like, and that floats my boat. So it was really just rediscovering like what, like who I am, like underneath all of those layers that we kind of, all those layers of paint that we've coated. There's 13 layers of paint on the wall in the old house.
Yeah. As you were telling that story, I was laughing to myself, and you may have seen it outwardly also, because I just recently had an experience. I grew up playing ice hockey. My boys, both my boys play competitively ice hockey. One's in college, one's going to be playing junior hockey. And we recently had the opportunity. Well, my boys decided they were going to try out for the Maccabi games for 2025. And then kind of unbeknownst, but beknownst to me, my older son decides to sign me up for the over 40 division. And he's like, you're going to come with us. And I was very stressed going into this trial. I'm a competitive guy. I played hockey. I haven't played nearly as much in probably the last 5+ years. And I go into this thing and I go to the tryout, and there were like 20 something guys. And I get on the ice for like 3 minutes, and I'm like, I'm better than most of these guys. I could still hang. And I was like, man, this is going to be good. So hopefully the moral of the story is, I think along those lines, we have these preconceived notions, but just going out there and doing it really made me feel good. It energized me. We're waiting for the results. Hopefully I'll make the team. And then I'm going to go into training mode for the next 9-12 months till the event, because I want to be, if I'm going to go, I want to be in the best shape I possibly can when I do go. So,
wow, that's very exciting.
We're our own worst enemies sometimes, right?
Yeah, it's just do it. I was talking this morning with a content creator, and one thing that I love about her more than anything is just she's not fearless. You think she's fearless if you see her. She's brave because she does have fear. But she comes off as fearless because she just goes out there and she will put herself out there time after time after time again. And it's just like it's like being alive. It's an incredible feeling. And so kudos to you. You're going to have to let us know when that comes up, dude. You're going to be like out there, you're going to be out there like doing your thing. It's like awesome.
I might have to video follow my journey there, but I'm looking forward to it. So listen, Phil, it's been a pleasure having you on and learning more about the Pearl Institute. We spent a lot of time talking about joy, and we ask each of our guests the same final question. You're no different, which is, what did you do today that brought you joy and put you in the right mindset for success?
Well, I did 2 things so far today, and they may appear mundane, but they are the thing. They are the thing that floats my boat, man. The thing that I love to do. I got out there early this morning with my dog. We went for a walk up to the school, let her off the leash, run around a little bit. Nothing really organized, but just moving the body. Got back before anybody else in the house woke up. People woke up. That was one. Number 2 was I made a big breakfast for everybody in the house. Cooked up eggs with bacon sprinkled in it, scrambled eggs, cut up a watermelon, and we feasted early this morning. Had a really healthy, good meal. Those were 2 things, man.
Sounds
I'm
awesome.
done.
Sounds great to me.
I know, right? Like,
sounds good to me.
It goes back to that stupid simplicity thing, right? It's like there's no, you don't have to have magic, some fancy thing to have joy. So those are the 2 things. Yeah. Appreciate you asking that.
Amazing.
How about you? What have you done today that brought you joy?
Oh, so for me, I mean, I had a weekend of joy. My biggest joy was writing my joy down today, Monday, like I do every day, from this weekend, and that was my son had my 18-year-old had a friend of his over, and him and her were going to Top Golf this weekend, and they invited us along to go with them, me and my wife, and it was awesome to know that both my boys invite us along, even at the ages of 18 and 21. So I guess we've done something right if they still want us around hanging out. So that brought me a tremendous amount of joy this morning, reflecting on the weekend for sure. So, Phil, we're going to have all your information in the show notes, but if people want to connect with you, learn more about the Pearl Institute, what's the easiest and the best place for them to do that?
Yeah, you could just email me at ppearlman@gmail.com, or you can just find me on Twitter and hit me up there. Those are really just practical, easy ways to do it. You go to my website, Pearl Inst, but really just email me. Just shoot me an email. That's really the easiest way, ppearlman@gmail.com.
Awesome. And we'll have that in the show notes. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to share, your story and the Pearl Institute with us. We appreciate it greatly, and enjoy the day.
Thanks for having me, man. Really, really appreciate it. It was a pleasure to be here.